Whether you love him or you hate him, SpongeBob has become one of the most popular cartoon characters of all time. Because of this, the SpongeBob SquarePants TV show has a total of 305 episodes, which in turn means there's a lot of interesting lore. Some of it is really weird, some of it is really important, and some of it makes no sense at all. Actually, despite being extremely recognizable and financially successful, not everyone seems to be a fan of this annoying yellow sponge. So today, in an attempt to find out why some people hate him so much, I'll be watching every single quote-unquote bad SpongeBob episode in full while explaining everything that happens and overanalyzing all the little details the creators probably didn't want you to know. Obviously, an episode being bad is pretty subjective, by the way, but these specific episodes are mostly the lowest rated ones, and pretty much everywhere you look, there's someone who hates them, so yeah. Also, there's a tier list at the very end of the video. Very hype. Are these episodes really that bad? Do the writers of the show have an obsession with torturing their lovable characters? Well, let's find out by watching every single bad SpongeBob episode ever. This episode is called One Coarse Meal. It's the second lowest rated episode of all time, so this should be extremely annoying. We start our adventure at the Krusty Krab. We see Mr. Krabs dimming the lights and getting naked? Mr. Krabs gets out of the tub and confronts SpongeBob because he smells something burning. The idea here obviously is that SpongeBob just like burnt a Krabby Patty or something, but I'm not kidding. When asked about it, SpongeBob says that the smell isn't food burning, but C4 explosives.
I'd say high-grade explosive.
Turns out this is just another one of Plankton's schemes to get a hold of the infamous Krabby Patty formula. Also, after the explosion, Mr. Krabs just has his clothes back on now. Plus, they're burnt, as if he was wearing them the whole time. Whatever, doesn't matter. Krabs and SpongeBob fight back in some over-the-top, goofy cartoon way to protect the formula from being stolen. Oh, that better not protect you. That better... That's not how bubbles work. They're supposed to pop. That's like their whole thing. Anyway, the fight ends with a literal nuke landing in the kitchen. But then, turns out it's not a nuke at all, but actually a giant robotic arm that grabs Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob, holding them with such force that you can actually see them getting squished together and the soul leaving their bodies. You know, I've been diving into this game recently that's seriously addictive. Think epic champions meets insane battles meets just a bunch of content for you to explore. It's our sponsor for today's video, Raid Shadow Legends. Always wanted to do that. I personally love the action and combat Raid Shadow Legends allows me to take part in, with some of the most epic battles and coolest champions I've honestly ever seen. My personal favorite champion is this miscreated monster that I summoned literally last night. He's got an AoE attack, some buffs, and also he just looks like a menace. I wouldn't want to screw with this guy. He looks pretty cool. Raid Shadow Legends not only works both on mobile and PC, so if you're ready to start, click my link in the description or scan my QR code for exclusive bonuses. Right off the bat, you'll get an epic orc champion named Tagoar. Plus, at level 15, you'll get an epic dwarf champion named Grizzled Jarl. But wait, there's more! You can even use the code Monkey King for the legendary Sun Wukong, but only until the end of November, so hurry. Come join me in-game under the name Darzii and join my clan, Darzii Dudes. I'm not very good at picking cool names, turns out. But either way, we'll have lots of fun. This game is awesome. I'll see all you guys in Raid Shadow Legends. Thanks Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Back to the video. At first I thought this was an upgrade for Karen, who's Plankton's wife, but no, this is straight up just a robotic arm, nothing else. So Plankton demands to be handed the secret formula, or else. But Mr. Krabs basically tells him, don't think so, KYS. So Plankton whips out the big guns, which happens to be a single pink feather. He's gonna use this to tickle them. Obviously. He starts tickling Mr. Krabs' booty, which we all know spans a very large surface area. He tries to tickle him to get some answers, which honestly is probably a legitimate torture method. Like, I'm pretty sure I remember reading about this actually happening back in the 1600s.
That tickles!
Despite all of this, Krabs doesn't cave to the tickling because he considers himself an alpha male. SpongeBob, on the other hand, is known to be quite childish, so it goes about as good as you'd expect when SpongeBob tells Plankton exactly where the formula is hidden before even getting tickled at all. Classic Bob.
Mission failed. We'll get him next time.
Anyway, before Plankton can get the formula, Mr. Krabs' daughter, Pearl, enters the room. Usually I would explain every character here and kind of explain who they are and what they're about, but I'm assuming most of you watching this already know these characters. Just know that for consistency's sake, the characters are generally split up into a good guy or bad guy category. So Pearl enters the room randomly and right away Plankton just freaks out, right? I guess the implication is that whales feed on plankton in the real world, so now Plankton is terrified because Pearl might eat him, I guess. Like, there's a lot of sea creatures in Bikini Bottom and you never see them eating each other ever. Hell, they're eating hamburgers half the time. So this doesn't like really make that much sense. Also, I could be wrong, but I think whales straight up eat crabs sometimes too. So like, why isn't Mr. Krabs scared of his own daughter? She could eat him at any moment.
Money!
Anyway, Plankton is so scared that he just leaves, so Pearl pulls her dad and SpongeBob out of the deadly robotic grip they were stuck in. She does it with basically no effort, by the way. Maybe she works out all the time. I don't know. So this entire opening scene is meant to establish Plankton's fear of whales, and even more important, Mr. Krabs' discovery to that fear. I'm sure you can see where this is going. I do want to point out this one funny part that made me giggle. It doesn't really add anything to the narrative, just thought it was funny.
This isn't money.
No, it's even better. This is what Mr. Krabs pays me with.
It's all starting to catch up with me.
Okay, that was funny. That actually was funny. So we find out now that Plankton's entire family got eaten by a whale a while ago, which is why his fear is so prominent. He literally has severe trauma, which is always fun to see in a SpongeBob episode. Turns out Mr. Krabs paid his daughter to scare Plankton a bit, so she does exactly that. It's clear from these clips that Plankton is like legitimately terrified, by the way, which makes the next couple moments so much sadder and like awkward. Plankton tells his wife about Pearl, but she doesn't believe him and calls him crazy. Plankton goes clinically insane for a bit, and we even see him break down into tears. Later that night, Plankton is having severe night terrors, dreaming about getting eaten by Pearl and disintegrating in her stomach acid. Jeez, this is actually kind of fucked up. We then realize that it's actually Mr. Krabs who's been terrorizing Plankton all along. He just has a nearly identical Pearl cosplay. Not sure where or how he found this costume, but it's a thing he has, I guess. Anyway, I'm gonna run through the rest of this episode since it's like pretty repetitive and kind of sad. Plankton is super depressed and wants to die. Plankton lies down in the middle of the road hoping for a car to run him over. I'm not kidding, that's actually what he says. SpongeBob feels bad for him, so he tells Mr. Krabs to take it easy from now on because Plankton might actually kill himself. Mr. Krabs says the good old, good, I don't care. El Bozo. So SpongeBob does what he thinks is right and tells Plankton about everything. He tells him that it was actually Mr. Krabs in a whale costume the whole time, so he has nothing to worry about. SpongeBob also tells Plankton about Mr. Krabs' biggest fear so that he can like use it as payback or something. I'm not really sure how that solves the issue. Like it definitely just makes everything worse, but okay. The next scene is Plankton walking into the restaurant like he's the most OP character on the server because he knows Pearl isn't around. He then uses another robotic arm to grab Krabs and deploy a mime into the Krusty Krab, which is Mr. Krabs' biggest fear. I mean, just look at him. It's terrifying. You'd think his biggest fear is something money related, like, I don't know, all his money burning or all his investments crashing to the ground. But no, it's just a mime. Sure, that makes sense. Anyway, during this time, SpongeBob uses a projector to make it look like there's a bunch of whales showing up or something. I don't know. Plankton gets scared of this and he just like runs off again. Mr. Krabs gets free and that's the end. This episode that everyone seems to hate is called A Pal for Gary. If you really disliked the first episode I covered, I think you'll really dislike this one. We start our adventure with SpongeBob and his pet snail, Gary. Gary's a fan favorite of the series. He doesn't really talk or do anything, honestly. But people like him because he's just a super chill dude. I did not like the way that was. What is going on? Okay, so this isn't really important to the quality of the episode, but I'd like to point out that I randomly froze onto this one frame while editing, and turns out you can kind of see a SpongeBob behind SpongeBob, meaning there's two SpongeBobs. Not sure if that's a mistake or just how this show does its animation. I'm just pointing it out because, I don't know. Looked funny. Anyway, the big premise for this episode is that SpongeBob is leaving for work, but when he does, he feels really bad for leaving Gary alone at the house. He's kind of scared that Gary feels lonely while he's gone, and he feels really guilty about it. As someone who has a dog that's around Gary's size, I totally get it, okay? I feel bad sometimes if I know I'm gonna leave him alone at the house for a couple hours and he starts crying, but also, I gotta go get you food, so like, I gotta go sometimes. Anyway, SpongeBob's ideas of Gary being lonely are quickly disproven because the second he leaves the house, we see Gary grab some chips and one of those soda drinking hats and just all around having a good time. So everyone judging me for saying that I leave my dog alone, this is probably what he's doing too.
Hi, how are you?
Later that day now, SpongeBob's at his job when a customer walks in with his own pet. It's a worm, I think. SpongeBob lets the customer know that there are no pets allowed in the restaurant. But instead of leaving his pet like SpongeBob did earlier in the episode, the customer decides to simply go eat somewhere else. Feeling extra guilty now, SpongeBob tries to call Gary to check in on him. Gary doesn't answer because he's watching TV and probably has ADHD, so he gets zoned out really easily. Which of course leaves SpongeBob to think Gary must be really sad. Because obviously, if your owner, who only fed you mush every day, left, you'd be sad too. Probably. It's nighttime now, so SpongeBob gets to go home finally. There's this whole bit where Mr. Krabs is adding tar to the parking lot for some reason and needs SpongeBob's help, but SpongeBob says that he's busy and needs to get home. The entire conversation serves no purpose, honestly.
Come in 5 hours early tomorrow to finish the parking lot.
You're the best, Mr. Krabs!
What was the point of that scene? I don't get it. Anyway, SpongeBob is walking through town now on his way home when he passes by some weird looking hut thing with a creepy person inside it. This reminds me of every carnival I've ever went to where the people in the booths basically beg you to play their game. Actually, more topical, it reminds me of The Unknown from that Willy Wonka video. Just a creepy guy. Who thought of this? It turns out that this weird person is selling pets, I guess. And I use the term selling very lightly here. SpongeBob walks in and basically just steals one. The creepy person actually tries to warn him about how the pets can be a little dangerous, but like every Genshin Impact player who gets invited to a social gathering, SpongeBob just doesn't care. So SpongeBob gets home finally and reveals to Gary that he bought a new pet and it's gonna be his new best friend. His name is Puffy Fluffy. Very original. And of course, as soon as SpongeBob leaves the room, Puffy Fluffy goes batshit insane with rage. SpongeBob re-enters the room, so Puffy Fluffy calms down, and you could probably see where this is going now. When SpongeBob there, good. When SpongeBob not there, bad. What phenomenal writing. This is cinema. Gary goes to eat his food, but SpongeBob says that he needs to share now, and then of course leaves the room. So Puffy Fluffy turns on his bully mode and eats all of it himself. Gary is terrified, obviously, so he hides in fear, and SpongeBob gets mad at him because he thinks he's just ignoring his new friend or something. Honestly, this entire section is just really sad. I mentioned earlier that Gary's a fan favorite, so it's no wonder people hate this episode where he gets bullied and to an extent abused. Like, SpongeBob's thing has always been that he's kind of an idiot, but it's done in a way in this episode that's extremely frustrating to the viewer. Like, the writing team just showed a major disconnect from their audience in this one. No one wanted this. No one thinks this is funny. So I guess the possible saving grace is the ending of the episode. If it has a satisfying ending, I guess it could redeem itself. That's not happening. So because Gary's a sweetheart, he even gives this thing a second chance by trying to play with it, but his efforts are cut short. Gary tries to be friendly, Puffy Fluffy tries to attack, SpongeBob gets mad at Gary. That's the cycle this episode goes through for like 60% of its runtime. It's finally nighttime now, so SpongeBob puts both of his pets in the same bed while he sleeps in his own bed. Maybe I'm just making stuff up, but I'm almost 100% sure I remember Gary always sleeping in the same room as SpongeBob, so there's literally zero reason to have him be in another room other than to just be away for SpongeBob for this specific episode. So that's cool, I guess. Anyway, Puffy Fluffy? I forget his name. I don't know what it is. The other pet has turned into a giant monster now, so I can finally stop saying his goofy ass name. I'm just gonna call him Monster from now on. It's a lot easier. So the monster is huge now and has these 4 tentacle things inside of his mouth, which he tries to eat Gary with. Gary is forced to grab a pen to defend himself. Honestly, this entire scene is like huge nightmare fuel. Had I watched this as a kid, I probably would have cried. Also, I didn't mention this earlier, but when SpongeBob bought this thing from that weird hut person, there was also another kid buying one at the same time. Nothing ever comes from this. I just think it's funny how it's extremely possible that this kid got eaten alive. So the monster chases Gary around the house, basically destroying it in the process, which is when SpongeBob finally wakes up and realizes something is wrong.
And my prized memoirs of T.S. Halibut. Oh, my clothes!
Is that a T.S. Eliot reference? Didn't that guy die in like the 60s? There's no way the kids watching this understand that. With his house completely destroyed, SpongeBob does probably the most obnoxious thing ever and immediately assumes that it's all Gary's fault. He breaks down a door and finds Gary actually getting eaten alive by the monster. Like, he's clearly terrified in the monster's mouth. But of course, because silly cartoon, SpongeBob for some reason thinks Gary is at fault and gets even more mad at him. Even during all of this, SpongeBob repeatedly tells Gary to let him go, as if he had a choice. The monster just doesn't give a fuck, which is when we get the origin of that one extremely out-of-pocket SpongeBob meme. Like, how is this an actual frame in a SpongeBob episode? I thought this was photoshopped for so long. Anyway, long story short, Gary might be a snail, but he's also the fucking goat, because he single-handedly ties the monster up and saves the day. This is probably the only enjoyable scene in the entire episode, so I guess the ending really did redeem this episode, right? Well, actually, the final scene is SpongeBob screaming for the monster to return, and then looking at Gary with disgust to blame him for everything one last time. There's also one more scene where SpongeBob brings Gary to work the next day, but it doesn't really have a point and it's just an excuse to make a joke about Mr. Krabs taking free labor or something.
Why didn't you say so?
Listen, like I said before, from a production level, I wouldn't really consider these the absolute worst. There are some moments that got me to giggle, at least, but just because it's not the bottom of the barrel doesn't mean it's good in any way. The writing is still horrible, the comedy in some parts is basically non-existent, and it all around just doesn't even feel like a SpongeBob episode at times. Like, where's the silly adventures? Where's the laugh? SpongeBob didn't even laugh in these episodes. It's no wonder almost no one voted for SpongeBob in a recent poll I made asking about who you'd like to hang out with the most. Turns out at his core, SpongeBob is just a really annoying character. So when the story's not written well to accommodate that, he basically has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. People like Gary and even Plankton to an extent. And the lowest rated episodes are basically just them getting undeservingly tortured the whole time. You can't even use the excuse that the writers had already used up all their other ideas because there's a whole 7 seasons after this episode. And a lot of them, I'll be honest, are actually actually more enjoyable to watch than these ones. Sure, the newest episodes can be cringe, and they probably don't hit the same humor it once did, but at least I can watch them and think to myself, hey, that's SpongeBob. He's a goofy guy and does goofy things. This first episode is probably the least disturbing of the two. It's called Ink Lemonade. And if you've seen this episode before, you know why people hate it. We begin our adventure with Patrick being a goofball. He's selling lemonade? So close. At the same time, Squidward comes out holding a garbage bag. The two talk for a bit. Patrick is really stupid. Squidward is really grouchy. It's a fun time. In my last SpongeBob video, Patrick and Squidward just weren't there, so this is actually kind of hype, especially Squidward. He's the best. Anyway, Patrick tries to get Squidward to drink some lemonade, but because Squidward isn't colorblind, he notices it's just regular water.
You should be hidden under a rock like the hideous freak you are. Do you even have a
Damn, okay,
license to
Squidward.
sell?
Bro woke up but he chose violence. That's
selling?
crazy. Not to worry though, because luckily for Patrick, the garbage bag that Squidward was about to throw out is full of lemons, apparently. Maybe he just really likes lemon cake. I don't know. Anyway, this is obviously not intended to be helpful since the lemon came from the garbage and is all squished and stuff. And it's here where we get the first of this episode's gross scenes. If you're not abnormally queasy to visual stuff, you'll probably be fine. But huge disclaimer, this is kind of gross. Patrick notices the broken lemon, so we get one of those hyper-realistic shots where he takes off a used band-aid from his hairy armpit and then puts it on the lemon. That thing is basically good as new now. Good job. Everyone's seen these kind of shots before. Not sure how they became a thing. Not sure who thought it was a good idea, but here we are. Of course, Patrick puts the still broken lemon and the used band-aid into the jug of water, and then almost immediately some random fish we've never seen before is like, yep, I'll take it. I'm drinking this right now. But then the fish quickly realizes what he just drank and gets very sick. But it's not all bad though, because at least this way Patrick gets his band-aid back.
Sorry, that's not included.
I'm gonna be sick!
This fish dude goes to Squidward's house to puke, because why not? Later on, there actually is this really funny scene where because Patrick is out of water, he tries to squeeze liquid out of a toy truck. Squidward says that'll never work, but of course, it does. Like, you've probably heard of microplastics before, but this is just straight up plastic juice. And just like that, I know every American within a 30-mile radius of this thing is lining up to take a sip. Anyway, SpongeBob finally shows up, and it's in the most SpongeBob-like way imaginable, which is by screaming and just being really annoying. Seriously, you'd probably think that I kind of hate SpongeBob the way that I talk about him sometimes, but I promise you, this thing is like one of my all-time favorite shows ever. The thing is, the great SpongeBob episodes are really, really good, but the bad SpongeBob episodes are extremely bad. Like, creatively bankrupt. They just gave a pen and paper to a monkey or something. I don't know. They didn't care. So SpongeBob shows up, and because he's yelling right next to him, Squidward gets really scared and shoots out a bunch of ink into the jug of water. This is a little gross, I guess, because Squid's inking seems kind of dirty in a weird way, but I think people actually do put ink in their food sometimes. Honestly, I have no idea. Do people consume squid ink? I don't, let me know. I'm too lazy to Google it. What does make me feel a little weird is how Squidward reacts to inking. He seems visibly worried or at least embarrassed, which I know in the lore of SpongeBob, Squidward's like the guy you're supposed to hate or whatever, but I can't help but to feel bad for him here. I don't know. SpongeBob decides to drink the ink right away because I guess he's got nothing better to do. That's the second thing in this episode that he has in common with Valorant players. And then of course another fish shows up and asks for a glass of the black lemonade, and wouldn't you know it, this fish loves it. Apparently this stuff is like crack. I like the jazz in the background. Hold up. The jazz goes hard, but what is going on? So now the boys have the new biggest trend in all of Bikini Bottom, black lemonade. The only problem is they don't have any ink left to make it. However, will they get more, I wonder? Let's find out. The next shot is Patrick asking Squidward for more ink, but when he declines, Patrick realizes the only way to get what he wants is to take it by force. Or in this case, just scare Squidward so bad that he shoots ink out of his nose as a natural reflex. You know, if nothing else comes from this episode, at least they found a creative way to use actual marine biology to serve its plot. One big clap for that one, person who isn't Stephen Hillenburg. Anyway, that's the plot now. Patrick just tries to scare Squidward the whole episode. I'm not even kidding here, he just rips his own skin off because it's shocking, I guess. To be honest, if I saw this in front of my door, I'd probably collapse on the spot. So Patrick got the goods, but because the lemonade stand is starting to gain some traction, the boys are gonna need a lot more ink and fast. This is basically Nickelodeon's version of a crypto scam, by the way. They're just lying to people and making millions off it. It's all very cool.
Lapse in my judgment.
Patrick then gets a giant spider to enter Squidward's house to scare the bejesus out of him. Squidward gets scared and snorts out more ink, but there's a much bigger line now, so Patrick needs to get more. It's this next sequence that makes this one of the most hated episodes ever, at least in my opinion. We see Squidward hiding all over the house, looking terrified. Everything is trash and covered in ink, which, like, Patrick, just grab that stuff. You know, it's like, it's already there. There's a bunch of it. Squidward gets a knock on the door, but when he opens it and checks it out, he gets locked out of his own house and enters this weird cabin thing that I need to remind you, Patrick built because he wants ink. Surely he could have just bought some at the nearest bargain mart, but Okay. Anyway, everything that happens in this cabin is really scary. There's a bunch of references to actual good movies. How quirky. 2 gallons of ink later, and Squidward ends up at the entrance of an almost identical Krusty Krab, and alongside that, he finds a newspaper that's dated 60 years into the future. He goes inside the building to find a puppet of himself still working at the restaurant and asking for his order. The idea here is that he's literally looking at a future version of himself and will be stuck working at the Krusty Krab forever. He will never accomplish his dreams. He will never find peace and solace. He will forever live out his greatest nightmare, which is to never be happy and to never gain the confidence needed to leave the job he hates working at every single day. A little deep for a kid's show, honestly, but alright. So Squidward is just drenching this puppet in ink, right? Obviously this episode sucks because it ranges from a little gross to borderline unwatchable, depending on who you ask, but it's also straight up just a Squidward torture episode now. Did we learn nothing from the last video, guys? Come on, stop torturing people who just want to be alone, okay? They don't deserve it. Anyway, the line for the lemonade stand got even bigger, if you can imagine that. Must be a boring day at the bottom of the ocean.
You mean you people actually drink this?
Yeah, Squidward's like, you guys know what this shit is, right? But then, in a clever twist, Squidward realizes what's going on, so he pushes the boys aside and decides to sell his own ink to make lots of money. In doing this, he reveals to everyone what they've actually been waiting in line for this entire time, which is a little disappointing. I'd imagine this is how people who bought a PS5 on release day felt when they waited 24 hours outside for a console with no games. Real talk though, Squidward just inks on everyone, which is as disturbing as you think it is. So then of course, everyone just rushes to his house and pukes all at once. Just why? Why did they do that? This episode is called The Splinter. Half of you are curious why this episode is so bad, the other half are about to turn the video off. This episode starts with SpongeBob getting hype as hell to start work for the day. That's how you know this is a fictional story. We see him prepping everything in the kitchen so he can start cooking. This is ironic because the writers of this episode did not cook jack shit. The conflict happens when SpongeBob accidentally flings his spatula into the ceiling and it gets stuck there. Oh no. Since when is the roof so goddamn high in that building? What? To retrieve it, SpongeBob makes a single giant stack of things like boxes, tartar sauce, swords, you know, things you find in a kitchen. While trying to get the spatula unstuck, all the sharp things fall out and land with their sharp end up because, you know, of course they do. Eventually, however, SpongeBob gets his spatula free, but at the cost of falling down directly into the swords. I'm not even kidding. While he's falling to the floor, he straight up just closes his eyes and accepts his death. Yes, take me. It is over. Like, aren't you a sponge? I think you'll be fine, man. All right, check it. Sponge? Right here. Okay. Watch. It's still a sponge. Anyway, as luck would have it, SpongeBob, of course, just doesn't seem to die here. This is a really good representation of the franchise as a whole. But then, the mood changes when SpongeBob immediately slips on some sauce and is headed straight for the ground. Another disclaimer. Seriously this time. Okay, listen, I'm being serious. This next scene can be pretty disturbing for some people, especially for something in a silly cartoon. So if you get really queasy easily and you think you're gonna have a hard time, I've put a little tiny GIF at the bottom of your screen throughout this entire next section. Just stare at that. Okay, it'll help you through it. So like I said, SpongeBob trips. It's in slow motion and super epic. But wouldn't you know it, one of his thumbs lands perfectly in line with a thin piece of wood, which this episode loves to zoom in on and show entering his finger. The wood enters his finger, he gets a really bad splinter. This whole moment is like 4 seconds total, which if you don't think that's a long time, it's just long enough to be awkward. Anyway, so now SpongeBob has this disgusting splinter in his thumb. It's not that bad though, right? Like, what's the worst that can happen? Naturally, he tries to take it out, but I'm not kidding. Every time he tries, he screams of pain because it's so unpleasant. I just don't want to watch this. Eventually, SpongeBob just accepts his fate as the guy who has a splinter in his finger forever and just works through the pain. In the middle of this, we get a quick Squidward bit where he actually smiles since he's not the butt of the joke for once. I'm just gonna show it here because it makes me happy.
Looks like I'm crushing your face.
Eventually, Squidward thinks something's up, so he decides to go check in on SpongeBob, and of course, because this episode decided to be as gross as possible, when SpongeBob shows Squidward the splinter, it's now full of pus, and this weird slimy green goo is dripping out of it. Just look at the GIF, guys. Okay, the splinter isn't real. It can't hurt you. This splinter does give Squidward an idea, however. He realizes that he can screw with SpongeBob a bit by telling him the splinter is a work-related injury, so if Mr. Krabs finds out about it, he'll be forced to send him home. And then because SpongeBob loves working so much, this isn't a good thing for him, and he gets super scared and tries to hide the splinter from Mr. Krabs the entire episode. It's a fun time. You'd think it'd be very in character for Mr. Krabs not to care at all about his workers' injuries and to just force them to work anyway, but I guess not. Maybe he's gone soft. I don't know. SpongeBob is all sad and stuff now. There's this bit about how Mr. Krabs can sense when things are wrong with his nose, but it doesn't really involve anyone of note, and it was just another way to show off how cheap he is, really.
These
quarters smell sad.
That's copper, actually. Anyway, SpongeBob really needs to get this Splinter thing resolved ASAP or else he'll get sent home. So he calls who he thinks is the best doctor in all of Bikini Bottom, Patrick. Oh boy. There's this bit where Patrick puts SpongeBob's feet in his mouth. If I had any shred of optimism left in my life, this would probably be really funny. The Splinter is really painful at this point, like SpongeBob's crying and stuff. So Patrick does what he's been hired to do and takes it out. How does he do this, you might ask? Well, check this silly little gif at the bottom of the screen, because he doesn't get the Splinter out at all, but instead grabs a big wooden hammer and whacks it even further into the thumb. Jesus, why would you let this guy touch your body? Like, stay away from Patrick, always. If you see this man, run away. The thumb swells up a lot, and to fix it, Patrick grabs a bunch of rotten garbage from the bin and just plasters it onto the Splinter. It's not pleasant. I don't know. It's gross. It's weird. Obviously, this doesn't fix it. It makes it a lot worse, and basically no one's happy. What a good episode so far. It turns blue and more goo comes out, so Patrick leaves, and then SpongeBob heads inside. When all of a sudden, Mr. Krabs is there waiting for him. SpongeBob is actually super scared now. He tries to hide his finger. The way he does it is kind of funny, I guess, but it drags on for a while, I won't lie. Eventually, he gives up and just shows the thing, and it's genuinely the worst thing I've seen in a very long time.
It was perfect. Perfect.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
The only thing that could have made this worse is if they did one of those hyper-realistic shots like they did earlier in the other episode. But thankfully, the animators just wanted to make this a little bit disgusting. Squidward faints because it's actually just really gross. Mr. Krabs just pulls out the Splinter like it's nothing, which doesn't make any sense. And all the gross liquids inside SpongeBob's finger spray onto the floor. And now his finger is just better, I guess. All better. It's like nothing happened at all. The episode finishes when Mr. Krabs mentions workers' compensation, which is when you get paid whilst injured. Squidward overhears this and immediately bashes his own brains in with the cash register. Get it? That's us. But of course, he doesn't get any money though because his shift ended 2 minutes ago. How unfortunate. Had to make him the butt of the joke, at least one time. It's a lot easier to see why people hated this last one, in my opinion. It's just really gross, doesn't really go anywhere, it's not really funny, writing's bad. SpongeBob likes work, but he's got a huge Splinter in his hand, doesn't really scream good idea, does it? And as for the first one, I found it less gross, but still weird, and torturing Squidward for a full 10 minutes is like never enjoyable, to be honest. And listen, I know there's gonna be a good chunk of people watching this that are like, well, I actually watched both of these episodes while eating food. I'm a manly person, I don't get grossed out by anything. And that's cool, I'm happy you enjoyed it. At least, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's just a cartoon, so enjoy it or don't. Doesn't matter. I'm just calling out what I think is bad writing and really weird artistic choices for a show marketed to 10-year-olds. That's my life now. That's what I'm doing. This first episode that everyone hates is called Stuck in the Wringer. It's probably the least hated of the two that I'm covering today, but people still really want to burn this thing alive. Our adventure begins with SpongeBob, who's currently naked and taking a shower. He does that thing where he washes his eyes with a bar of soap. That's a good idea, honestly. Gotta keep those clean. The soap then slips out of his hand in an epic slow motion sequence where he's yelling the whole time. It's honestly very loud. Why is that so loud? My ears! Anyway, that slow-mo bit was kind of pointless because SpongeBob just pulls out a second bar of soap and finishes his shower. So now that SpongeBob is walking around completely wet and naked, we then see him use the Wringer. He basically turns the handle and then slides through it, which dries him off in a couple seconds, I guess. I'm not sure if I'm having one of those Gen Z VHS tape moments, but I actually don't think I've ever seen a Wringer before. So in case you're as clueless as I am when it comes to the world, yes, Wringers are real, and yes, apparently they do still make them. I had to Google it. I had no idea these things still existed, to be honest. Why do I feel like everyone's gonna get mad at me for this?
Idiot.
Anyway, SpongeBob finally puts his clothes on, but then, as he's about to leave for work, SpongeBob slips on the soap he dropped earlier. He bounces around for a bit, and this scene's played up to be a little dramatic, okay? But SpongeBob just lands in his bathtub and everything is actually all right. That is until he accidentally drops the second bar of soap and is about to step on it. Except he also catches himself here, and it's just baiting the viewer again. It's almost like the writers knew this episode was going to be poorly received, so they preemptively wrote this joke where they're like, oh yeah, you know the bad thing? Yeah, it might happen, but it might not though. Who knows? We'll skip all the boring bits here. Eventually, SpongeBob slips on a rubber ducky that just randomly spawned in, which of course gets him stuck in between the Wringer. That's the name of the episode. You knew it was gonna happen. In the position he's stuck in, his arms are with his bottom half, which is extremely unfortunate since it basically cripples him from using his hands this entire episode. He tries to get unstuck using his tongue, but he just ends up breaking the machine. So he's wondering how he's gonna get unstuck, which is when Patrick shows up, and you'll never see this coming. Patrick makes everything 100 times worse. No way. I can't believe it. Patrick hears SpongeBob say the word stuck, so he rips his own flesh and whips out some forever glue, and I'm not kidding, applies it in between SpongeBob and the Wringer so he can stay stuck forever.
Now you're stuck forever!
Why would you do that?
Patrick.
Also, does Patrick just carry around glue all the time? The glue gets hard really quickly, so SpongeBob obviously starts freaking out and has a panic attack or something. He really does try his best to escape the Wringer, but despite his efforts and extremely muscular teeth, he just can't seem to do it. He should have just stayed AFK for a bit. The unstuck button appears after like 20 seconds.
Patrick, I squirted.
On the bright side though, Patrick uses his 99 strength in RuneScape to at least rip the Wringer out of the ground, allowing SpongeBob to walk around with it now. We get this super motivational speech about how being stuck shouldn't stop you from achieving your dreams. It's honestly super heartfelt. I'm not crying, you're crying. Anyway, after all that, SpongeBob is now hard at work. I guess he figured out a way to make Krabby Patties without using his hands. Squidward checks up on him and starts laughing right away, which is probably like ableism or something, which is f***ed up. He even cracks a one-liner at SpongeBob's expense.
Love the outfit. Where'd you get it? The hardware store?
It's so not funny, which makes it hilarious for me. Despite this, it's SpongeBob who gets the last laugh, however, because he accidentally sprays mustard into Squidward's eyes, burning them and making them fall off from his face. This is not only actual nightmare fuel, but I'm pretty sure SpongeBob secretly did this on purpose, which is just straight up assault. So that's good. So this is when everything goes wrong. One thing leads to another, and eventually some customers get hurt, and the cash register's money flies all over the floor. This is when Mr. Krabs shows up because money is involved, and that's like the entire character at this point. He just likes money, that's his thing.
Money, 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 money.
This part is kind of dragged out, to be honest, so what's important to know is that Mr. Krabs kicks SpongeBob out of the Krusty Krab and tells him to only come back once he gets out of the Wringer that he's stuck in. Does everyone think SpongeBob has this on by choice, by the way? Like, no one's tried to help him or even like call the hospital or something? What if he's losing a lot of blood circulation and is about to pass out? A few moments later, and SpongeBob meets up with Patrick again, which probably means things are about to get a lot worse. And real quick, I want to say this episode doesn't seem that bad so far, at least for me. Like, it's definitely not my favorite episode or anything, but it doesn't seem horrible. Yet. Patrick forces SpongeBob to stop crying and brings him to Super Weenie Hut Juniors to cheer him up. Sadly though, because SpongeBob can't really use his hands at the moment, that means he can't eat his ice cream, so he's basically forced to watch Patrick eat everything by himself. That's when they decide to leave this place, but before they do, Patrick eats all of SpongeBob's ice cream, and he does it without using his hands, so like, why didn't SpongeBob do the exact same thing? It's a little weird, whatever. The next stop is at the carnival. Of course, the first thing Patrick wants to do is play the game where you throw a ball at a bunch of cans. It's the game where you need your hands to play, obviously. Of course, SpongeBob sucks at this game. He throws a ball and it bounces back and hits him in the face, which gives him a black eye. It's not pretty. And honestly, this episode is getting a little weird now, I'm not gonna lie. Patrick then forces SpongeBob to go on this one spinning ride, but because he can't hold on properly, SpongeBob gets launched at 80 miles per hour and gets spawn killed on Fortnite. Boom. That last part was a joke, obviously. SpongeBob is looking pretty rough at this point and is actually pretty angry at Patrick, and like, rightfully so, honestly. And I get it, Patrick has always been the stupid character, and that's fine, but there's a difference between being stupid in a silly way and then being stupid in a frustrating way.
I won't help you anymore.
Good. Honestly, you make things worse. I hope you go cry more, Patrick. Everyone around SpongeBob calls him a bully or something. I don't know. It's kind of sad. SpongeBob feels like the victim to me. The next day, Patrick is having a staring contest with his schizophrenia, which is when he checks up on SpongeBob to find him watching a static screen on TV and basically going insane. He's a little depressed. He's a little manic. He might have sniffed some of that glue. Let's not talk about it. Patrick is so sad that he starts crying, and you'll never see this coming. The wetness of Patrick's tears liquefies the glue, and SpongeBob straight up gets unstuck. What? What the? So you're telling me all they had to do was put the glue under some water and he could have gotten out like this whole time? They literally live underwater. What? Anyway, SpongeBob breaks free. He's immediately not sad anymore because sadness isn't real, I guess. And then the two hug it out to end the episode off.
Well, at least we're together.
This episode that people really dislike is called House Fancy. Half of you are really excited to see my reaction in this episode, and the other half of you have already turned your screen off. This episode begins with Squidward making some tea and watching a TV show called House Fancy. This episode revolves around Squidward, which is hype because he's low-key one of the best characters in the entire show, but it's also very scary because every Squidward episode I've ever watched has him getting seriously hurt, or at the very least, psychologically tormented. Oh boy. Anyway, so Squidward's watching his show, and it's got some weird 90s animation. Wow, that's so weird. It's so different. It looks like a different show entirely. I love it and I hate it at the same time. This TV show is basically some house spotlight competition thing. Every episode they visit someone's house, and at the very end they choose the person with the fanciest house to become the winner or something, I think. I'm sure there's a show like this that exists in real life. It's just a bunch of rich people with like super epic gaming rooms or something. So Squidward is watching the show when he gets a sudden phone call. Turns out it's from Squilliam Fancy Son, who's Squidward's narcissistic lifelong rival. These two don't like each other at all. They hate each other's guts. This dude basically calls Squidward to let him know that he's on the House Fancy show and just wanted to rub it in, I think. Squilliam is super rich and Squidward is not. So, El Bozo. Squidward continues to watch the show live and is getting super frustrated. Squidward is basically seeing his biggest op getting to live the life he's always wanted. We're like 2 minutes into this episode and Squidward is already the butt of the joke. And I'm not gonna lie here, most of this episode is pretty boring. Turns out a lot of it is just Squilliam walking us through his super luxurious house, and Squidward gets really mad by it. His house is exactly like Squidward's on the outside, except it has multiple floors. On the inside, though, it's actually a lot bigger. There's a lot of room here to be completely alone and watch YouTube videos for 12 hours a day. Squilliam keeps showing focus to his golden doorknobs that he's got scattered around the place. Not even sure they're actually attached to a door. They're just like on the wall, which is weird. He's got a custom bathroom with diamonds on his toilet paper. He's got a jacuzzi in his elevator. I'm not sure how that last one works. It seems like an electrical hazard. We even go to his top floor, which is where we see a giant unibrow made entirely of golden doorknobs. I'm gonna spoil this now. The doorknob thing goes nowhere. So yeah. After 5 minutes of this tour, the guy who hosts the show decides that Squilliam is going to be the winner of House Fancy. But then, in an act of panic, Squidward calls Squilliam's home to talk to the host and lets him know that he actually has a better house than the one the host is in right now. The host takes this at face value for some reason, while still on the air, might I add. So the TV host and the camera crew decide that they're going to head over to Squidward's house in about 2 hours. How does this guy know where Squidward lives? How do they know this isn't just a prank call? Answers we may never know. This is when we cut to Squidward and his anxiety. Basically, he now has 2 hours to completely alter his house and make it more fancy than the one Squilliam showed off. That's gonna be pretty rough since there's broken glass on the floor and massive holes in his drywall, but I believe in you, Squidward. Okay, you got this. The job is gonna be tough, like I said, so Squidward enlists the help of SpongeBob to at least get an extra set of hands. Ironic, because the last episode I covered, he couldn't use his hands. Hilarious. To start off, SpongeBob's main and only mission is to apply some paint onto a specific part of the wall. The last time SpongeBob used paint, it went very well, so this is a wonderful idea, Squidward. Good job. Also, the paint doesn't even match the wall at all, so like, even if it was applied properly, it would probably still look really bad regardless, but whatever, it doesn't matter, dude. It's a cartoon. Who cares? Squidward leaves the room and SpongeBob almost immediately screws everything up. He soaks himself in the paint and unleashes 1,000 years of pain onto the interior of Squidward's house.
What was that noise? Skin me alive and drench me in boiling oil! What have you done?
Squidward has so many intrusive thoughts. That's crazy. There's also this weird 2-second bit where Squidward straight up turns into the spitter from Left 4 Dead 2. This is actually terrifying. Time is running out quickly, so now the boys have to do their best to mitigate the damages. This is when Squidward has the bright idea to move the living room couch out of the way. I'm gonna say this right now, this is the scene that makes this the most hated episode for a lot of people. And full disclosure before we move forward, this scene really sucks. As I did with the Splinter episode, I've put a wacky little gif at the bottom right of your screen, so if at any time you feel like what's happening is just too much, do your best to focus on the gif, okay? The gif is safety. Look at the gif. SpongeBob and Squidward lift the couch up, but since it's covered in paint and super slippery, someone drops it, and it lands right on Squidward's foot.
Now don't move it till I say...
There's some sort of miscommunication, and SpongeBob pushes the couch further into Squidward's toe, further denting it, and then eventually completely ripping it off. Remember the gif, guys. Okay, the toenail can't hurt you. Look at the gif. For some people, visually, this scene might not really upset you, but I do have to say the sound played, specifically Squidward screaming, makes this scene extremely painful to watch. They just completely decimated Squidward's foot in this. And then just when you think it's over,
I told you not to move it till I said...
it just doesn't stop. Squidward eventually slips on his own ripped toenail and falls with the couch in hand, thus breaking it clean in half. This is really unlucky. The screaming plus the visuals here are actually pretty disturbing, like at least for SpongeBob standards, so it's no wonder people don't like watching this episode. The last minute or two of this episode just felt like an eternity to me. It just goes on for so long. They love torturing Squidward for no reason. I don't understand. Anyway, the episode isn't done yet, and somehow it actually gets more frustrating, if you can believe that. Squidward needs to bandage up his foot, so SpongeBob is in charge of vacuuming the entire room. This is when he turns the vacuum on the highest setting, which in Bikini Bottom I guess means it's able to suck up everything within a close proximity, because as soon as SpongeBob SpongeBob lets this thing go, it completely destroys the house. It sucks up the couch, the plants, the fridge, pretty much everything. It also ends up sucking up SpongeBob himself, which I think means he's dead now. R.I.P. the goat. Squidward gets back and hears a knock on the door. Real quick, I should say there's this subplot that's been playing out throughout this entire episode that I haven't mentioned yet. It's this story about how Patrick borrowed SpongeBob's brain or something. This knock on the door was just Patrick returning the brain, which like doesn't make any sense and isn't really that funny. It's honestly just padding since this episode is barely 10 minutes as it is. But before Patrick leaves, he actually uses Squidward's bathroom, which I'll be honest, gives us probably the funniest moment of the episode because of just how insane this scene is for some reason.
Please, please, somebody put me out of my misery.
That's crazy. That's like the Godfather. What did Patrick do to that toilet? Anyway, eventually the vacuum blows up and takes the house with it. Everything's kind of everywhere, and of course, this is exactly when the TV host and Squilliam Fancy Son show up. It seems like a mission failed from Squidward, but actually, in a weird bit of social commentary about modern art, the TV host says that Squidward's house is actually the fanciest of them all because it's so abstract or something. It's like those paintings you see that are worth $1 bajillion, but it's just a bunch of lines everywhere.
The illustrious post-primitive movement popularized by famous designer Saul Limkin.
The host officially declares Squidward the winner of House Fancy, and in a weird twist, Squidward actually ends up being happy at the end of this episode. Squilliam is crying on the floor, and honestly, that's pretty much it. Half of it is this boring house tour from a character no one cares about, and the other half is filled with Squidward's anxiety and that goddamn toenail. Just why? Why do they always do this? Much like the first episode I covered in this video, this one wasn't great. It's not super well written and feels like it was AI generated half the time. It feels super rushed and will probably only ever be remembered because of how traumatizing that scream was. The first episode, again, has a lot of the same issues. Everyone's mean to SpongeBob, and otherwise, it's just kind of boring and feels out of place in a kid's cartoon. But maybe that's just where they're headed now with SpongeBob. Maybe it's less about entertaining a younger audience, and it's more about creating shocking and memorable moments for people to talk about for years down the line. And if that's the case, I'm pretty sad about it. I mean, I'm making this video right now about this, right? This episode is called Late for Breakfast. Not only is this the actual lowest rated episode ever, but it's also the very first episode of the series. So if you don't know anything about this show, like at all, this is your first exposure to it, that's extremely unfortunate, I won't lie. We start our adventure with Patrick waking up out of bed with an extremely convoluted morning alarm. Was that meant to happen? Or was that RNG? We see Patrick's morning routine here. He dances with his pet sea urchin. He brushes his eyes with toothpaste for some reason. Not sure what's going on there. We also get one of those really ugly close-ups within the first minute of this episode, which, although very unique, is probably a horrible sign of what's to come. Quick reminder that I'm completely aware that this is a kid's show that's made for kids, and I'm over here just analyzing the fuck out of it. This is gonna blow your mind, but even the great SpongeBob cinematic universe isn't absolved of criticism. Who would have guessed? Also, it's just fun. Anyway, Patrick leaves his bedroom, but there's this weird bit where a knight wielding an iron axe runs towards him. Before the knight can get to him, though, Patrick closes the door. Try to remember this moment. It's important for later, kind of. Anyway, literally 3 seconds later, and Patrick's sister named Squidina comes out of the same door he just closed. I was honestly never aware that Patrick had a sister. Has she ever been mentioned in the original series before? Because I don't know. Also, she's a squid, I guess, for some reason. Is this like a Darwin situation? Why is she not a starfish? I don't get it. Anyway, Squidina drags Patrick away because it's time for the Patrick Star Show to begin. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because it's kind of hard to understand after one watch, but the Patrick Star Show is a real TV show in this TV show, but not really, because it's actually just Patrick standing in front of his bedroom window, singing and like doing random stuff. So basically, the only people that can actually watch this show are the people who are in his front yard, I think. I'm not sure if that's exactly right. If it is, it's kind of weird and doesn't really make any sense, even for a SpongeBob show. Like, imagine the Truman Show, but instead of airing on TV, you actually had to be in Jim Carrey's bathroom cabinet. You know, it just wouldn't work. That's all I'm saying. This episode just really wants you to know that Patrick is kind of an idiot. He's not aware of anything at all, but like, I don't know, more than usual in this for some reason. Anyway, Patrick says that he's hungry, so it's time to eat some breakfast with the family. This is where we meet Patrick's grandfather. He's very old, alongside his mom and dad, who are different.
Morning, Mom.
Mom.
Good morning, Dad.
Wait, why do they look so different? Yeah, look, this is them. This is them right here. Why do they not look like that? What? So I guess they completely overhauled how Patrick's parents look in the spinoff. I read online that apparently this is because the original iteration was too boring or something. I honestly don't really care how they look, but it is still a weird decision. So like every other SpongeBob fan, I'm of the belief that whoever okayed this change should go to jail immediately without a chance of parole.
Sir, get down! Sir, get down! Hey!
So this breakfast scene goes on for way too long, and then eventually Patrick is finally about to eat, but there's one major problem that he forgot to think about. The Star family are stereotypical US citizens. How sad. I'm about to cry. This means that everyone already ate all of the food on the table before Patrick could even get a bite in. I guess someone also ate all the food on his plate, which should be kind of illegal, I'm not gonna lie. The rest of the family litters their dirty dishes, because the environment, I guess. They all leave, so Patrick checks the fridge for more food, but when he opens it, it's just the guy from Hollow Knight again, for some reason. Is Patrick getting haunted or something? Does the knight even know who Patrick is? Answers we may never know. Anyway, so Patrick is looking for food around the house because if it wasn't in the fridge, it'll surely be under a carpet or something, right?
Ew! Mom's got a vacuum under there more often.
Funny that he mentioned a vacuum, because much like a vacuum, this show sucks. There's this bit where Patrick is talking to his granddad, and this guy is so old that he does that thing where he's like, back in my day, things were tougher, and we had to walk to school across a literal war zone. There was also dinosaurs back then, I guess. The dinosaurs in this flashback are just Plankton and Squidward with big dino bodies. It's honestly kind of cursed. I wouldn't want my child watching this. But listen, everything's okay, because Patrick has come up with a foolproof plan. If he can't find food around the house, then he'll just turn his famous TV show into a cooking show where he makes the food from scratch. I don't think he knows how food works. Anyway, my last joke was kind of pointless because Patrick doesn't even cook actual food. He just decides to cook some smelly socks, dirty sneakers, used napkins. God damn. I don't know why every bit of SpongeBob content after 2017 has an obsession with being like extremely gross for some reason. I guess that's what Stephen Hillenburg would have wanted, right guys? In any case, one Simpsons hit and run reference later, and the food's done, but it came out looking like actual dirt, so it's inedible. Who would have thought?
Remember that at all.
I don't know.
Is that a Dan Schneider
know
reference?
what
Yo, future Darzii here. That comment was pretty inappropriate. Sorry about that, but Dan Schneider. Don't like that guy. So it's a little later now, which means it's time to eat again. For lunch, Patrick's mom ended up making the dubious food from Breath of the Wild. How appetizing. And then Patrick eats it and then goes to bed, and that's it. That's the episode. That's all that happens. The screen fades to black and the knight shows up again to jump scare the viewers one last time. But like, what was this guy's purpose? Does he come back in like a later episode, maybe? I'm actually convinced that the creators of the show put this in because Stephen Hillenburg specifically mentioned how much he didn't want knights in the show or something, I bet. Just to spite him, just because they just hate his vision on everything for some reason. This second adventure is called Bummer Jobs, and in my opinion, it's worse. We start with probably the best SpongeBob character of all time, Squidward. I'm actually really excited to see him because I didn't know he was in this, and he's usually way more relatable than like anyone else in the show. So Squidward's doing some shenanigans with a fishing rod and some newspaper. I'm not exactly sure what he's doing here, and I don't care enough to go back and find out, so whatever.
You're paying for your newspaper subscription today.
I don't get it. He like stole the money? I don't understand. Also, do fishing rods have a use in Bikini Bottom? I doubt the sea creatures in Bikini Bottom are violently pulling out fish from the water. So like, why do they exist? What are they used for? Inside the house now, and both of Patrick's parents are ready to leave for work. This is when Patrick freaks out of nowhere because he doesn't know what a job is, I guess. Like, didn't Patrick work at the Krusty Krab at one point and like answered the phone? Remember that bit? Is the Patrick Star Show a good cartoon? No! If you're a little confused like I am, let me explain something to you that the show doesn't. Turns out, this entire spin-off series is a prequel to the original SpongeBob show. That actually explains a lot. Maybe I missed the part where that was very apparent, but even then, it took me a full episode to get suspicious enough to even Google it. It would have been cool if that was explained in the intro song or something, because I straight up just thought Patrick packed his bags one day and just like left his rock house for some reason. I figured his grandfather needed a caretaker or something. I don't know, just thought he left. It's not really that important, but the fact that it's really not that obvious is also kind of funny to me. Like, make them look a little younger or something. I don't know. Anyway, Patrick learns what a job is and is all excited to get one now, which is how you know this is a fictitious story. The problem here is that Patrick already kind of has a job. He hosts the Patrick Star Show. That's what he does. That's the name of the show, which, by the way, I should mention, this time around actually has one live viewer, which is very exciting. It's this weird, creepy guy who looks like he's enjoying the show a little too much. I don't want to be weird about it, but it's heavily insinuated that this guy likes kids. I don't know why. Isn't this a kid show? That's so weird. Also, this might be an extreme deep cut, but this guy sounds really similar to the character Flathead from The Ripping Friends. I made a video on that. If you care, please watch it. Not sure if it's the same voice actor. I couldn't really find much about this guy. The Ripping Friends has connections to Ren and Stimpy, which people have told me has connections to SpongeBob. This isn't really that important, but if it's all connected somehow, it'd be kind of cool, I guess. Wait, pause. Turns out, this guy's voiced by Tom Kenny, because Tom Kenny just voices everyone. So yeah, mystery solved. Anyway, back to the story. Patrick is putting on a tie, but he fails and then breaks the weirdo's back. Good for him. Patrick somehow runs into SpongeBob, who actually does look a little younger, so I'll give it that. I didn't think SpongeBob was in this TV show, honestly. Like, why is he even? Between SpongeBob, Squidward, and Plankton all showing up, this feels like it could have easily been a regular SpongeBob episode or something, but I don't know, whatever, doesn't matter. SpongeBob and Patrick end up job hunting together for a bit, but then another gross close-up, this time them of a tattoo gone horribly wrong. Why did they even put this in? So the boys first get this gig at a grocery store where they pack everyone's bags. It's actually alright for a little bit, but it quickly becomes a competition between the two. So they try to speedrun everything, but they end up ruining the food for everyone. This naturally causes a lot of chaos, so they get fired 20 minutes into their first shift. Later, they get a second gig as painters, kind of. I don't think they're actually getting paid for this one, but they randomly decide to paint and actually renovate this old lady's entire house for some reason. It looks cool, I guess. They did a good job. Also, another gross close-up for some reason. That's 3 of these now, I think. So, just, you know. Good writing all around. After they finish painting the house, they decide to become taxi drivers, which is extremely ironic because little does SpongeBob know he's gonna fail his driving test over 1 million times. I'm not kidding. Like, just give up at this point. Obviously, the boys don't have a car, so they just decide to give people piggyback rides to where they need to go, which sounds harmless, but it directly involves them with a high-speed police chase. There's this weird bit where they're having lunch, so we cut to a TV show inside of this TV show. It's some sort of mafia drama. There's these 2 mobsters, and they scare the My Leg guy by threatening to hurt his leg. This is probably the funniest part of the last 2 episodes, not gonna lie.
Where was your leg on Tuesday night?
My leg?
We cut back to Patrick's house now, and we see Squidward trying to talk to Patrick's dad. This is gonna sound a little weird, but I think what Squidward is trying to do is scam the Star family somehow. Like, trick them into giving him money for newspaper or something, I think. He's having trouble doing that, so Squidward hires SpongeBob and Patrick to get the dad's money once and for all. These 2 are obviously hyped as hell about this, since it's a job they can do. They have a bit of trouble even talking to the dad, even though Patrick literally lives here, and like, that's his father. Why can't he get in the house? Our boys dress up like mobsters since they saw it on TV earlier, but that doesn't really work either. Eventually, they just bring an actual crane to the house and lift it up so they can shake the dad out. They end up getting a quarter from him or something and then cut it in half since SpongeBob and Patrick want to split everything 50-50. Extremely common Squidward L, unfortunately. And then at the very end of the episode, Patrick is doing his show again and talks about how jobs in general are really stupid and boring and everyone should just stop working because it isn't fun. I 100% agree with this, which is why I uploaded the video you're watching right now. And finally, there's one final close-up of another gross scar on Patrick's belly.
The hand is so itchy.
Oh, okay. I thought there was gonna be like another pop-up like there was last time. Listen, I can see why people hate it. It's extremely dumb and never really goes anywhere. Like most cartoon spin-offs nowadays, there doesn't really seem to be a point to it other than like, let's print some money. That being said, I can't see why young kids who just love flashy colors would watch this, honestly, so I can't really blame anyone. But like I said earlier, this definitely could have just been a SpongeBob episode on its own. Like, they've had full Patrick episodes before, I'm sure, and they could have easily done some flashback thing or something. If you look online, you'll see lots of people talk about how this TV show ruined SpongeBob's reputation to an extent. The newer episodes of that show already had a bad rep, but this just feels like the people in charge don't care anymore, and that's kind of the saddest part. It feels like old SpongeBob will never return because the people in charge just, you know, don't want it to, I guess. But who really cares? It's just a dumb show made for kids, and at the end of the day, that's cool. This first episode is called Yours, Mine, and Mine. A very silly name for a very silly episode. Our adventure begins with Patrick at the Krusty Krab, struggling to pick something to eat. I'm pretty sure the only item I've ever seen anyone eat here is a Krabby Patty, so I'm glad we're establishing early on that Patrick is an idiot. Squidward's pretty annoyed already. He doesn't really want to be there. Talking to Patrick is kind of like talking to those dogs that use buttons to communicate. It's basically the same thing over and over again.
You eat a treat for Wringer. Hell no. Alright.
Anyway, SpongeBob recommends that Patrick gets the Krabby Kitty meal because it's actually 30% cuter, but only costs $1 more. This is prime Mr. Krabs marketing here, by the way. Patrick picks the kitty meal, but when it's time to pay for it, turns out Patrick literally has $0. Oh my god, who saw that coming? The dude who just chills at home all day and watches live streams has no money. Squidward does not care at all. He's got to be the best character in the entire show. He just wants to go home here. It's so relatable. So because SpongeBob is an actual good friend, he offers to split the price with Patrick, and then the two can share the meal together. It sounds like a good idea, but because Patrick only has a bunch of garbage in his pocket, SpongeBob pays for it all. Very unfortunate. It probably took SpongeBob 2 days to save up that much money. Not only that, but when it's time to share the meal, Patrick straight up eats it all right away. He's not thinking about SpongeBob at all here.
Are you gonna save some of that for me?
What?
Nothing.
This is when Patrick gets really mad because his meal didn't come with a toy. We've all been there. These emotions are very real. He explains that he wants a full refund with his meal because there's no toy that came with it, despite, I don't know, Patrick not even paying for the food in the first place. Anyway, the mention of a refund triggers Mr. Krabs, who's having a very romantic moment with his money in a completely different room. So Mr. Krabs comes out and sees the opportunity to make a quick buck by asking Patrick if he would like to upgrade to the toy package. Very elusive, very high-tech. Patrick says yes, but the Krusty Krab actually doesn't have any toys, obviously. So what Mr. Krabs does next is actually kind of insane, not gonna lie. Mr. Krabs grabs someone else's full-sized Krabby Patty, rearranges the pickles and the ketchup somehow, adds a straw here and there, and
An official Krusty Krab licensed toy?
SpongeBob basically falls in love with this thing, so he gives Mr. Krabs $3 for it. Mr. Krabs gets all excited. He runs to his office, presumably to jump back in his tub full of money and have some really good alone time, if you know what I mean. SpongeBob is now having a lot of fun with his new toy, the Patty Pal, is what he's calling it. The two are dancing together. They're basically a Farrah Mercy duo on Overwatch. The two are inseparable.
Excuse me, what the actual
This is when Patrick comes in and reminds SpongeBob that Bikini Bottom is in fact a communist country.
My new toy?
Don't you mean our new toy?
No, but seriously, Patrick thinks that the two should share the toy because according to him, the two split on the price of the original meal they bought, even though they like definitely didn't. It was all SpongeBob, but whatever. We get a cursed moment where Patrick wears SpongeBob's face for a bit. It's very scary. Don't worry about it. SpongeBob, in an effort to be a good friend, reluctantly shares his new toy with Patrick. SpongeBob's the GOAT, honestly. I will hear no SpongeBob slander in the comments. I'm gonna be honest, this dude is better than me. I would have told that starfish to commit die, Roblox style. And this is the entire premise of this episode, by the way. SpongeBob and Patrick are essentially parenting this new toy, Krabby Patty. They're supposed to be sharing, but Patrick is hogging all of the fun time. SpongeBob can't seem to get it back. And if you think Patrick's being bad so far, you have no idea just how evil this dude really gets. Like, he's the reason this episode is so bad. I can't even explain to you how annoying this guy is. Anyway, it's nighttime now, and Patrick still isn't letting SpongeBob play with the Patty Pal. Go figure.
Night, night, Patty Pal.
No touchy!
Why is Patrick so mean in this? SpongeBob has always been there for you, and then over a burger, you just like decide to switch up? That's crazy, dude. Patrick holds on to the toy for the rest of the night. SpongeBob is all depressed because he hasn't gotten his turn with it yet, even though he like paid for it all and everything. Thankfully, SpongeBob figures this isn't too bad, actually. Since it's just one night, you know, Patrick will give it to him the next day, surely. SpongeBob figures he'll be able to play with the Patty Pal tomorrow. Hey, let's check in on Patrick real quick. I'm not kidding, we get a solid 20 seconds straight of Patrick dancing with this Krabby Patty. You honestly can't make this up. Anyway, it's now the morning and SpongeBob is all excited. It reminds me when kids used to queue into Ninja on Fortnite back in 2020.
Ninja, big fan of you!
Gary tries to tell SpongeBob that Patrick won't share with him, but he gets ignored. Gary's the GOAT, don't ignore him ever again. SpongeBob makes his way to Patrick's house and turns out the dude is still partying. What was in that kiddie meal earlier? Dude stayed up all night for this. When SpongeBob knocks, Patrick pretends to not be home. I guess because he doesn't want to share the toy after all. Very clever. SpongeBob tries to out Big Brain, the pink dumb guy, by just waiting for him to come out. This works almost right away. SpongeBob catches him red-handed with the toy. There's this random moment where Patrick shows his perfectly groomed armpit hair. If this wasn't so weird, I'd actually be very impressed. Anyway, the time has finally come. SpongeBob is officially out of patience, so he decides to take matters into his own hands. He grabs Patrick and demands the toy, but Patrick throws a fit and acts like a child. The ultimate defense. Listen, I know Patrick's character has always been super dumb and annoying, but this time it just feels kinda different. Usually him being really stupid is the joke itself, but this time he's being so dumb that even SpongeBob is getting angry at him. And when SpongeBob has a bad time, everyone has a bad time. It's just not fun to watch, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of frustrating, in my opinion. Like, just give the dude his toy. He paid for it, you know? Give it to him.
5 minutes. 1 minute.
I swear, Patrick is so stubborn, dude. I'm so dead ass here. 100%. Just get another one at this point. It's not worth it. Eventually, Patrick grabs the Patty Pal and runs away. The two end up in Squidward's house because, of course, they have to bother this guy on his day off. The funny part is actually that he's seen SpongeBob and Patrick do stupid things so many times before that he just doesn't care anymore. The two are fighting it out to the death and Squidward's just chilling, drinking his coffee. The two then land in Sandy's home. Turns out she's the most reasonable person in Bikini Bottom. She sits the two boys down and explains that a healthy compromise involves an open communication. Resolving conflict isn't always easy, but with the proper steps, SpongeBob and Patrick can eventually get there. They just have to work together. Oh, what's that? They already left? All right, never mind. The two get bored of Sandy spitting facts because they both have a TikTok brain. They continue fighting all the way to the Krusty Krab, which is when Patrick finally snaps and has his Joker moment. He says that if he can't have the Patty Pal, no one can, and just simply eats it. How evil. Why would you do that? SpongeBob paid for that and everything. Patrick is such an ass in this. Despite SpongeBob being 100% in the right here, everyone still treats this situation like Patrick has any leverage at all for some reason. Mr. Krabs shows up and sees SpongeBob being sad, which is when he offers both of them a brand new Patty Pal at the very, very low cost of only $13.50 each. How is this guy not a billionaire yet, by the way? Bro's been scamming everyone since forever. The two get very excited, and Patrick even says that he'll pay for both of them this time, which you think would be like the ultimate redemption for this character at the end of this episode, but no, because Patrick grabs SpongeBob's wallet and the episode just ends. Very funny, Patrick. I hate you with all of my guts. This episode that everyone hates so much is called The Nitwitting. This episode released in season 12, which came out in 2018. Already, this explains a lot. I won't lie. Our story begins at our local bargain mart with SpongeBob and Patrick yet again causing havoc in public. I'll be completely honest, I'm not even sure what they're trying to do here. This is very confusing. We're 15 seconds into this, and SpongeBob's already getting tortured. I can't do this, man. It's explained that Patrick made SpongeBob wear a blindfold to avoid getting stuff in his eyes. I'm only really explaining that because Patrick then gives us one of those gross close-ups. It's one of those shots that these later seasons love spamming so much for some reason. It's very gross. I wanted to show it. Anyway, turns out Patrick is at this secret club meeting, which gets SpongeBob very curious. This secret club is called the Empty Head Society. I'm not kidding. This entire thing is just a bunch of idiots being idiots. Surely this will be a very interesting episode. SpongeBob joins the club and is fascinated by all the dumb people inside. They do this weird thing in this club where almost everyone in it is like this southerner character for some reason. I remember them doing a dumb Texan thing earlier in the show, like a couple seasons back or whatever, but this is still kind of weird. Like, what's with the hate towards southerners? That's weird. Okay.
Mustard or ketchup?
Anyway, upon entering this club, it's important that you drop your brain off at the entrance for safekeeping. It is the Empty Head Club, after all. This must be where all my teammates hang out right before we play a competitive match on Counter-Strike. SpongeBob and Patrick give their brains up and don't really act any different, to be honest, which is kind of funny. I'll give it that, I guess. Patrick meets up with a regular at the club, and they do this special empty head handshake. Really going all in on Patrick being an absolute idiot today, aren't we? Goddamn. So the meeting is officially about to start because I guess this thing is somewhat organized somehow. The leader of the club has a small guy in his belly button. The small guy starts reading off an upside down cereal box. He then gets kicked off the stage like a football. I'm just explaining everything that happens here so you can actually understand how goofy this episode is. This is when the leader asks if there's anyone new here tonight. And of course, SpongeBob is pretty new since he just joined. So SpongeBob heads on stage, which is when we get arguably the worst scene in any SpongeBob episode ever. Seriously, this is up there with the toenail scene, in my opinion. This is like really, really bad. I don't like this. The leader exclaims that it's time to pass the jar. One by one, every member of the club takes their turn putting a bunch of spit into a glass jar. Eventually, the jar makes its way to SpongeBob, which is when we get this scene. Oh, this is so bad. I hate this. Don't drink it. No! Oh, I don't usually care for these scenes, but I swear I felt that in my mouth. That's right, SpongeBob drinks the jar full of other people's mixed saliva. And you want to know what the worst part is? He didn't even actually have to drink it at all. Everyone gets disgusted after he does it. Turns out this wasn't some weird initiation thing like you probably thought it was. The Empty Head Society just collects their spit every day as a tradition. For some reason, SpongeBob thought he had to drink it, so I don't know, he did. It was very gross. Why would you ever write this into a show? It's so weird. All the previous spit jars are labeled today, which I think is actually kind of funny. I'll clap for that one. The leader gives SpongeBob 2 badges for being so dumb. One is a piece of bacon, and the other is his chewed up gum. With how stupid everyone is here, I'm surprised no one's rushing to the stage to eat the badges or something. This is when we get to the main point of the episode, when the leader mentions that it's time for everyone in the club to do their civic duty. Everyone here has a loaf of bread for a brain. I can't imagine this will go very well. Everyone sings the official Empty Head Society song, which isn't fun to listen to at all. It sounds like those TikTok beats with a bunch of cartoon sound effects.
2, 3, let's go.
The lyrics to the song itself is just calling everyone dumb, which I get is the point of the song, but also it's just boring and difficult to understand, like you can't really tell what they're saying. Compared to something like the Goofy Goober song, which is so memorable and exciting, it's just night and day, is what I'm saying. I don't know what else to say. Anyway, it's time for their civic duty, which in this case just means causing a bunch of trouble in town. It reminds me of that time people stormed the Capitol building, but if everyone there was really dumb and had nothing else to do. Wait a minute. So everyone here vandalizes the town. They screw with people's bowling games. They ruin people's workouts. They even cause major traffic accidents, which is kind of insane, actually. Like, arrest these guys immediately, please. People could have died here. Later, with SpongeBob and Patrick specifically, we see them hitting parking meters and replacing them with soup. Nothing in this episode makes any sense at all, by the way. SpongeBob seems to be the only one that thinks this is wrong and weird. It's actually nice that he's on the good side, unlike everyone else. Although he did give his brain away like everyone else at the very beginning, so although I admire his attitude here, it kind of makes zero sense why he'd care. Anyway, eventually SpongeBob gets left alone and seems to be lost. I'm quickly realizing this episode doesn't have a coherent plot. In an effort to remember where he is, SpongeBob waters his brain in hopes that it grows back. Of course, it catches fire, which makes SpongeBob become 101% idiot. You can tell this because of his goofy looking face. SpongeBob thinks that if he walks backwards, he'll find out where he came from, which is kind of funny, I guess. SpongeBob is so charming. I'm almost enjoying this, but he's so stupid. There's not even a story here. here. While he's walking backwards, by the way, SpongeBob talks in reverse here. Of course, I thought that'd be some kind of clever dialogue where if you play the clip in reverse, you can like understand what he's saying and it's funny or something. But after reversing the clip, I'm gonna be honest, I think it might just be gibberish. I don't know. If you can understand anything here, please let me know. I can't tell what he's saying at all. In true Genshin Impact player fashion, SpongeBob gets rejected by society and gets hit by a lady's purse. Later that day, he's walking around all alone in an alley. He forgot how to sit down, which is weird because he remembers how to walk, talk, breathe, and like every other thing that people don't usually need to think about. But then, the one time I actually enjoyed seeing Patrick is when he randomly shows up here in this alley with SpongeBob's brain. After going through a couple incorrect brains and shaking him for a bit, SpongeBob finally returns back to normal. So now, instead of being super stupid, he's just regularly stupid. Glad to have you back, buddy. SpongeBob immediately goes to clean up the whole mess everyone from the Empty Head Society left, but when he checks it out, turns out everything is already clean. This is when he runs into Sandy because yet again, she's the most responsible person in Bikini Bottom. I apologize, Sandy. I wasn't familiar with your game. Turns out Sandy is part of a club called FEMA, which is a whole club that just cleans up the mess that the idiots make constantly. Also, she's labeled as a karate cleaner, which is funny. Like, why are those words together at all? It's so random. Like, what? This is when SpongeBob eats the badges he was given earlier because getting his brain back meant nothing. The Empty Head Society ruin town one more time. They sing their famous song, which will actually make your ears bleed. And finally, Patrick breaks your screen with his face. Was it really that bad? I know a lot of people rag on SpongeBob nowadays for being awful, but let's be honest with ourselves, these two episodes today were especially bad. Patrick straight up being a dick to SpongeBob was annoying in the first episode, and in the second episode, nothing really happened at all. Everyone was just really stupid, and that was it. I guess. There was kind of a story at the end when SpongeBob tried to find his way home, but that's literally the last 2 minutes of the episode and barely mattered at all. This thing was pretty much an excuse for the animators to create some wacky faces, although I'll never forgive them for making that spit scene. I hate you. This was gross. I think I've said this before, but these episodes felt like when you have an assignment due the next day, so you just chat GPT everything. That's what these episodes were. A string of ideas that loosely connect and can barely be called a full episode. It's bad, it's gross, and according to some people online, it completely destroyed SpongeBob. All right, I don't know how to start this. I'm very tired. I've been up for like 40 hours. So here's the issue, is that every episode on this list is like a bad one. So there's not going to be very many high tier episodes here. In the scope of SpongeBob, these are all probably like D or lower, if I'm being honest. But I'm going to try to rate them according to each other. One Coarse Meal to D. No, okay, wait. A Pal for Gary is D. I confused the episodes. One Coarse Meal is a C, because it's sad, but it doesn't involve Gary, and Gary's the goat. So next we have Ink Lemonade, which is like pretty disgusting. Squidward gets tortured. All things considered, honestly, it's not that bad. I'm gonna put it in B because I think these two are definitely worse than it. Does that make sense? The next episode is The Splinter, which is also going in D with a Pal for Gary because it's a horrible premise. I heard that Tom Kenny himself hates it, and it's just like gross. Like, why? How is this an episode idea? It makes no sense. I don't like it. It's D. It's my channel. I can do what I want. We then have Stuck in the Wringer, which honestly, the best one out of any of these. I'm not gonna lie. It's not offensively bad. It's fine. Honestly, I kind of want to put A tier. Again, you know, this is definitely like a D tier episode, but compared to all of these, you know, it's like the highest tier out of all of them. We then have House Fancy. People are always like, dude, you know the toenail scene? That was crazy. Without the toenail scene, this episode honestly isn't that bad. I almost want to put in S because of Squidward's voice acting and how good it was. And I also almost want to put it in D because it's the worst thing you've ever seen in your life. I'm putting it in here because the toenail scene is just so bad. We then have 2 Patrick Star episodes. I'm just gonna... yeah, I don't know why I included those. The final 2, Yours, Mine, and Mine, honestly, it's okay. I'll put it in C because it's kind of weird. And then the Nitwitting, honestly, probably also a C. Maybe I'll put Yours, Mine, and Mine in B. And then Nitwitting is actually just kind of horrible. So I'll put it in C. And then there's the tier list. There's no S tier because all the episodes are bad. That's the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Become a member for only a single $1. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. Shout out to all my current members. You guys are so awesome. I appreciate your support so much. And guys, don't forget to use my Raid Shadow Legends link in the description or scan my QR code to grab exclusive new player bonuses, including 2 epic champions. Paul Abdul scores this one a solid bad episodes out of 5. And yeah, thanks for watching.